Okay, now, been reading on Facebook and folks, various people complaining about reels where the instant anti-reverse doesn't function, as in that, the reel will wind both backwards and forwards, regardless of how you set the little lever on the bottom. The system is known as infinite or instant anti-reverse. This is a particular problem with quite a lot of reels in cold weather. And I keep seeing people say, oh, you don't want to keep using that 50 or 100 quid reel. You want to go and spend £200 or £300 on a reel. That will solve the problem. Not everybody's got that kind of money. Many of them suggesting it, in my opinion, probably daydreaming about the reels they wish they could afford rather than ones they actually have anyway. For a lot of people who are angling on a budget, a 50 quid reel is quite an expensive purchase. So let's dispel the myth about spending huge amounts of money on a reel is vital for going fishing. You can spend a tenner on a reel and it'll wind line in. The problem with instant anti-reverse is when it gets very cold, the grease in it freezes, which stops it working. So I thought I'd do a little explanation here of exactly how an infinite or instant anti-reverse bearing works. Pretty much the same whether it's in a multiplier or fixed spool reel. Only difference is some multipliers with instant anti-reverse will also have a ratchet and pawl reverse as well, kind of a belt and braces move, so that doesn't stick. And what actually happens is, this is a typical unit out of a fixed spool reel. That's your bearing for the flyer, and when we take this off, this is your anti-reverse bearing. Now the anti-reverse bearing consists of a bearing with rollers in it and a metal collar. That's the metal collar, that is the bearing. Now inside this bearing is a number of steel rollers. Now they're set so in one position they can only allow the actual collar to turn in one direction. Now the way this works is the collar goes in, sits on the rollers, that sits down like that. Now what you will have is a thing like this. Now when it's pushed in that position, that will actually hold those frame which the rollers are in backwards, which then means the reel will only run in one direction. When it comes this way, it pushes the rollers out of the way, so it will now roll in both directions. Now where the problem comes is when the grease in here gets very, very cold, because you've left your reel sat on the rod rest and you're not changing your bait every 10 minutes like you should be doing. It's not just the fact that it's minus whatever, but the wind chill, as the wind blasts across your reel sat out there in the open while you're sat in the bivvy with the little heater going or your Cornish pasty warming on your tilly lamp, that grease solidifies so the rollers don't engage with that collar. You also have the problem that when you actually switch it off so you can wind both directions, that is a mechanical action which actually pushes this bar back out of the way. To re-engage it, all you do when you move the little lever is you take the bar that pushes out of the way, so it's no longer physically pushing it. It relies on a spring to pull this back into place to re-engage the rollers. Now if you put a really strong spring on, you'd all be complaining that the reel went clack 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 when you were winding in. So the spring has to be soft enough to pull it back in, but not so strong as to make the reel noisy or stiff to wind. Once that grease solidifies, because it gets very, very cold, that spring is no longer strong enough to pull that back into place. Now this doesn't matter whether it's a 10 quid Fladden reel or whether it's a £200 Shimano reel. They both have the same principle of the anti-reverse and both going to give you the same problem when they get extremely cold. The simple answer is, when it starts playing up, pour the remains of your coffee cup over the reel and it will warm up and the problem will go away. Or put it under your pullover or whatever, just warm the reel up a bit. It is purely that the grease thickens in there. I hope that helps and explains why the problem exists at this time of year.